Father Time seems like it's caught up with the Kansas City Chiefs. Either that or they just need some more weapons. We'll discuss that here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is, in fact, your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of one of two Locked On NFL shows. This one is called The Barbershop, and that man right there is David Harrison. If you can't see him because you're listening, that's all right. It's David Harrison from Locked On Commanders. He's here to help us navigate, along with the use of clips from local experts from around our network. We're going to navigate everything that's going on in the National Football League right now. And we're glad to have you. Shout out to the everydayers who join us each and every day. And you can too. All you got to do is check wherever you watch or listen to your podcast and make sure you tap in and you'll be an everydayer as well. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. Also, if you're traveling, you need something to read, make sure you check out the newsletters from Locked On NFL at Locked On NFL Podcast, LockedOnPodcast.com/newsletters. Always good information there. We're going to give you some good information here. We're going to start talking about quarterback injuries at the we're going to end up talking about quarterback injuries. The style of play an issue? I think it is a little bit, and the way plays are called. Ben, not so happy in Chicago. Man, did you see Ben Johnson walk off that field and not speak to Jared Goff, act like he didn't want to the other day in Detroit? And has time caught up with Kansas City Chiefs? My answer is yes, but it's not because of Patrick Mahomes. He's still under 30. It's because of Andy Reid and Spagnuolo and Travis Kelce a little bit, and Chris Jones a little bit, because you see these star players making mistakes that you don't customarily see. And it's not because they're old, but maybe sometimes, Dave, you're just getting tired and you just got to do this a little bit and think you can get away with it. But the Chiefs have been good for a long time, and now they're 0-2.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, some of the magic has kind of worn off, I think, around the Kansas City Chiefs, right? And you saw this happen with the New England Patriots kind of towards the end of their time with Tom, and things kind of were starting to fall apart. The only difference there is I think a lot of what was happening with the Patriots seemed to be internal kind of turmoil, right? Like conflict, like who's more important than who, and egos and all that stuff. With the Chiefs, I mean, I think a lot of it has been injuries, right? You look at a lot of the things they've tried to do, even on the offensive line and the receiver position, they've had a lot of injuries, and what they've tried to do to keep things afloat, that just hasn't worked. And then the more stress, the more weight that has been placed on Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, just the less and less they're able to carry. And now Travis is getting towards the end of his career, so he's trying to hold on and trying to, maintain being that weapon for Pat. But, again, you talk about father time, the injury bug, whatever it is, like it just kind of reminds you of why it's so impressive that a team like the Patriots was able to do what they were able to do for so long. But I think it just kind of is what it is. Like, I don't think anybody is scared of the Chiefs anymore. I think there's a respect, there's an understanding, but I don't think anybody fears them.
No, I don't think anybody fears them either. And it's when you look at the stats of these games and you watch them in real time, and then you look backwards and you say, man, they just don't have any weapons. They're not going down the field with the ball. I listen to this from Locked On Chiefs, and it'll surprise you.
If I told you that 17.2% of Patrick Mahomes' passes were actually beyond 20 yards this game, would that surprise you? Because it took me by surprise. If I asked you that they had a 4-3 advantage in rushes of 10-plus yards, would that surprise you? If I told you that 20-plus yard plays, the Kansas City Chiefs outpaced the Eagles 4-1, would that surprise you? 3 of them being 20-plus yard completions.
Unreal when you think back to it, and they scored 17 points. And look, from week to week, it's like, okay, well, it's the defense, or Veach needs to get fired, the GM. Maybe we won't fire that man already with the job that he's done. And you mentioned the Patriots. We forget they had like 9 years where they didn't win it in between championships, right? So the thing is I'm not jumping the gun on Andy Reid. I'm not jumping the gun on any of this, but maybe just like New England reinvented themselves to start winning again, because the team that won Super Bowls at the end was not the same type of team that won them at the beginning. Maybe the Chiefs, instead of just tweaking it here and there, okay, we'll add an offensive lineman here, or okay, this guy's gone, we'll just elevate it. Maybe it needs to do or be a little bit more of a deep dive into let's do what got us here, as opposed to trying to keep us here by just tinkering with it a little bit. Maybe we need some wholesale. We need a new Travis Kelce. We need a new. I think they tried to get a new Tyreek Hill, and he's injured right now. And
Yep.
Mind you, they got injuries at receiver. We understand that. Maybe this committee by running back thing doesn't work. Maybe you need a Saquon Barkley type, a real good running back, instead of just patching all of these dudes together because you were able to do that before.
I mean, honestly, I think you just hit on a really big thing there. I think the running game for the Kansas City Chiefs has always been something they've been lacking. You know what I mean? Even in some of their best years, and even in some of their best moments with running backs, like say Isaiah Pacheco, right? Like even during Pacheco's best days in this offense, it kind of felt fluky, right? It was gimmicky. It was kind of like, okay, you got us right now, but it's like you're the first team to pull out the Wildcat type of thing. Like, but then once everybody catches up to it, you're right back to where you started, and you can't just pull out one gimmick over another gimmick and just continue to do that. So eventually you got to try to establish a consistent running game, and that's something that the Chiefs haven't been able to do, which that I think if you want to talk about like a roster building shortcoming, because there's running backs every year that are coming out that are, third round picks, fourth round picks. I mean, Basil Tootin is out there catching touchdown passes in Jacksonville, right? Like there are backs every year coming out all over the draft that teams are able to get incorporated into their offense with success. The Kansas City Chiefs have not been able to do that. But I do want to push back on the thought that like maybe the GM hasn't doing enough. I mean, don't forget, like Rashee Rice, when he's on the field, has been very, very talented.
Top 12 receiver, right?
Yeah, his own behavior, notwithstanding, which behavior is part of the scouting process. But we know this, like it's hard to predict what a man is going to do when he gets millions and millions of dollars and all that NFL fame, right? Like college fame is college fame. But NFL fame is a different level, and NFL money is a different level. Now, there's a totally different discussion. NIL, I think, is certainly going to help some of that moving forward, right? But Rashee Rice was kind of not like kind of the beginning portions of that type of thing. But super talented when he's on the field. Again, his own behavior has hurt him. But Patrick Mahomes, I mean, that's what I talk about. Like some of the magic is kind of drained out of Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes colliding with Rashee Rice, setting him to the cart. Like that's not something that happened to the Patriots. It's not something that happened to the 90s Cowboys. It's not something that used to happen to the Kansas City Chiefs. And then Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy has been very effective for what he's been able to do for what the Chiefs wanted. And don't forget, they wanted to pair him with Rashee Rice, right? Like they want these guys are supposed to be a duo out here. And then Travis Kelce just inadvertently shoulder checks him and boom, Xavier Worthy is off the field. Like these are things that you just start to feel like the Chiefs are maybe snake bitten. And it's almost like, the NFL gods, for lack of a better term, are just like, look, enough of the 20-year dynasties. We need another team to come out here and be good in the AFC. So we're going to just kind of put these roadblocks in front of the Chiefs. But the things about them, I mean, the thing you notice about them, though, Wig, not all the magic is worn off. Because even at 0-2, I've heard nobody hitting the panic button. I've heard nobody abandoning ship on this team. I think everybody still expects them to either be in contention to win their division still, or at least be in the playoffs when the regular season comes to an end.
No doubt about that. And we'll talk about a team that might be able to dethrone them in that division in just a second. I will mention this. One of the big favors the Ravens have done for Lamar Jackson is actually going and getting Derrick Henry. Jalen Hurts has Saquon Barkley.
Yep.
When you look around the National Football League, Kyron Williams, he's a featured back for the Rams. And you name all of these teams, you name that other player, that running back that they have that takes a little bit of pressure, just a little bit of pressure. Hey, you can say what you want to say, but Dalvin's little brother ain't Dalvin's little brother. No, James Cook has arrived in Buffalo. So when you look at all of his peers, he has someone he can at least share the identity of the team with. And I think the Chiefs would be very smart to do that. Now, You ain't got to worry about sharing identity with the Chargers because that is all Jim Harbaugh. But they are for real, and I'll tell you why in just a second here on Locked On NFL. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward is backup quarterback Jake Browning coming in after Joe Burrow's devastating injury and leading the Cincinnati Bengals to a victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like that, there's more to every highlight. There's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's show is also sponsored and brought to you by Game Time. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in a stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives you the advantage, and it gives it back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals, and I'm talking about your favorite NFL games as low as $100. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Pushing along here on Hump Day on a Wednesday with my man David Harrison here on in the barbershop on Locked On NFL. We were talking about the Kansas City Chiefs being 0-2. We talked at the beginning of the season that, hey, man, this is going to be a very, very tough division. And they're at the bottom right now. They got a couple of 1-1 teams in front of them. We'll discuss one of them in just a second. We're going to talk about the team that's at the very top. A team that Jim Harbaugh has to be the epitome of why you take the best player. No one could anticipate Rashawn Slater being hurt 2 years in a row, but Jim Harbaugh took Joe Alt last year in the draft. And had he not done that, they'd have a serious problem. And he has developed Quentin Johnson into an absolute deep threat and a ball-catching threat down the field when everyone had written him off. Now, him and Ladd McConkey and a veteran, they look really, really good in the receiving corps. Isn't it funny how the problems that we thought that the Chargers were going to have are actually strengths on their team?
Well, the biggest problem that the Chargers had last year, Wick, because you're going to remember, like, I was out on the Chargers. They had a good record. They were winning a lot of games, and I kept telling everybody that would listen, the Chargers are not that team. And unfortunately for them, they proved me right. But they fixed this offseason, Wig, their biggest problem. And their biggest problem was Greg Roman. And I don't know what has gotten into Greg Roman, but suddenly Greg Roman knows how to call passing plays. Yeah. And I've kind of always said this, right? Like, how is Justin Herbert going to be an MVP caliber quarterback when he's on a run first offense with a run first head coach and a run first coaching staff? Well, these first 2 weeks, the Los Angeles Chargers have been a passing offense because last year, listen, they were 11th in passing yards per play, right? But they were only 19th in passing yards per game because they didn't throw the ball around the yard. This year, they're like second in yards per play, and they're like fourth in yards per game because they're slinging that thing around. Like you said, Quentin Johnson, a rival, James Yarko of Locked On Bucks asked me after week 1. He's like, hold up, is Quentin Johnson a must start in fantasy? And I said, nah, bro, I'm going to need to see it more than 1 week. He texted me during week 2. He's like, how about now? I said, yeah, bro, go get Quentin Johnson. You know what I mean? Like, let's do it. But, we'll see what happens because the Denver Broncos, like you mentioned, they're not necessarily having the greatest start to their season that they wanted, but that's always a tough game. Broncos-Chargers is never going to be easy, so we'll see what happens there. But after that, man, Chargers got the Giants who, I know they stood up against the Cowboys, but I think we all agree that the Chargers are above the Cowboys. The Washington Commanders, we'll see what happens with Jaden. We'll see what happens with them, moving forward and how they do this weekend against the Raiders before we talk about that too much. The Dolphins, I mean, the players, it's like the reversal, right? When a coach comes out and gives a quarterback a vote of confidence, well, the players came out and gave their coach a vote of confidence, which doesn't usually bode well for everybody. The Colts will be exposed by the time that happens. JJ McCarthy is struggling. Tennessee is Tennessee. Like, the Chargers have a very favorable schedule, but they're also playing very good football. That's the difference between this year and last year. And so last year the Chargers started off well, and I'm like, nah, they're not all that. This year they're starting off very well. I'm telling you, I think this is real. And the Chargers, if they stay healthy, I think they are going to win the AFC West.
And there's something else that they're doing. Back in draft season, people were sitting there looking at their roster saying, they need a corner. Why ain't he taking Will Johnson? And they got these big corners, the Cam kid out of Notre Dame a couple of years ago. They got these dudes running around like T-Rexes back there, and they got pass rushers, even though they're going to be without Khalil Mack for the time future. Listen to my man, David Wade, here at Locked On Chargers.
The Chargers defense absolutely throttled the Raiders on Monday night, and they are now 2-0 and atop the AFC West. The Raiders made some big improvements, adding Geno Smith and Pete Carroll in the offseason, but it didn't matter because the Chargers dominated them, sacking Geno Smith 3 times for 30 yards lost, and also picking him off another 3 times, holding him to a passer rating of 37. It was great to see this defense rally around their captain after losing Khalil Mack early in this game. It didn't matter, and you wouldn't know it because their other stars like Derwin James and Deion Henley stepped up in a big way. Henley with an interception and a sack in this one, and the Chargers offense looked great in the first half. Quentin Johnston had a big touchdown, but they sputtered in the second half, and the defense was there to bail them out time and time again. But now they are 2-0, headed to Denver with a chance to go 3-0 and 3-0 in the division. But for the full breakdown, make sure to check out the Locked On Chargers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I also didn't even mention Trey Harris, who was their second-round pick this year, who has been catching some balls, as their 4th receiver. But he mentioned Deion Henley, and I'll throw another one out there, Jamari Caldwell. I told anybody who would listen that the Chargers would have a distinct advantage with the draft, especially on day 2 and day 3, because Jim Harbaugh was just in college recruiting all of these players, and he has an advantage, and he knows a lot about them. Let's move, though, because we talked about the Chargers a lot. Let's go to a team that we also discussed a lot in the offseason, and that is the Chicago Bears, and what the impact of Ben Johnson and the additions of the interior offensive line, what that would all do for that team. I think they're running out of patience up in the Windy City. Here's my man, Lauren Cox. You're going to start peeling this thing back, and then we'll finish it off as soon as he gives you his opinion.
We knew this Bears season would require some patience in the first year under Ben Johnson, but that patience is running low after an embarrassing blowout loss to the Detroit Lions in week 2. The plus side, Caleb Williams and the offense looked a little better, but a couple of bad turnovers in there didn't help. And the defense giving up more than 50 points for the first time since 2014. That looks like the real big problem, as we thought Dennis Allen would take care of that side of the ball. But pass rush concerns, secondary concerns, not even just the injuries, but a veteran safety like Kevin Byard gives up multiple touchdowns in this game. They miss tackles across the board, and the penalties continue to be a problem. So it feels like the coaching problems that we thought would be solved by Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen aren't solved, and there's real questions about the talent level of this roster to keep up in the NFC North. A lot to break down this week on the Locked On Bears podcast. Find it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
When you change things, but things don't change, you can already tell they're looking for somebody who's the reason, and this is going to start pointing right at Ryan Poles in just a second.
I mean, look, he should have been gone. Like, I'm not really one to call for people's jobs, but he should have been gone. And that's a whole different conversation. Let's talk about Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
Because what
Why you got that smile on your face? Well, first of all, you got a little half smile on your face like you cooking something up. I'm trying to figure out.
It's because of something Lauren just said. I'll get to it. Well, yeah, let's do that first. Let's do that. Let's just so I do have this smirk. The smirk I have on my face is this surprise. And this isn't at Lauren, but there's a surprise going around at Dennis Allen's defense not necessarily being this juggernaut of a defense. Y'all not been paying attention to what was going on in New Orleans? Like, the Saints defense has not ever been a juggernaut like under Dennis Allen. And in fact, last year, if you go back to several conversations that Ross Jackson had on Locked On Saints, several conversations that I had with Ross Jackson, not necessarily on Locked On Saints, but you can't necessarily hear all of them. But when you're a defense coordinator putting Brian Bresee in the shade over the center, you don't know how to use your personnel, and you don't have the right personnel for your scheme. So that's a whole other conversation. Why anybody hired Dennis Allen thinking he was going to turn the Chicago Bears back into the monsters of the Midway, which is just beyond me. So Beyond that, let's get beyond that. Let's get to Ben Johnson. Listen, what have I been saying for over a year, Wick? Because we've been talking about Ben Johnson becoming a head coach for over a year now. I've been saying you got to wait and see. I don't know if this man is going to be a leader of men. We know the X's and O's, yada, 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 right? But what have I always been saying? You got to wait and see. You got to wait and see. You got to wait and see. Lauren started it off. We knew this year's Chicago Bears season was going to require some patience. Y'all, we're 2 games in. If you're 2 games in and your patience is gone, you cannot claim to have had patience. That's like showing up to the doctor's office 5 minutes before your appointment, saying, okay, I'm at the doctor. I got to have patience because I know we always get in a little bit late. And then you check in. You're like, is the doctor ready to see me? No, the doctor is not ready to see you. I'm out of patience. If you never had patience, okay, if that's the case, listen, it makes it harder because you're 0-2 and you're 0-2 in the division. And you're 0-2 against the Detroit Lions, who you have their offensive coordinator, so you think you stole something, and you're 0-2 against J.J. McCarthy and the Minnesota Vikings, who then in week 2 come out and lay an egg. Week 1 is not week 2, okay? J.J. McCarthy went on a streak that you don't see a lot of people go on in that game of the Chicago Bears. If he doesn't go on that streak, the Bears actually win that game. That's a little bit of a fluke, right? The Detroit Lions, remember this, Bears fans. The Detroit Lions defense, even under Kelvin Shepard, has practiced against the Ben Johnson offense more than the Chicago Bears have run the Ben Johnson offense. So much so that after the Detroit Lions made a key play against Chicago Bears, what did their defense do? They ran a Ben Johnson play as a celebration. You literally played a defense that not only knows your offensive coordinator better than you do, because Ben Johnson is their offensive play caller or whatever, but they know your offense better than you do, right? Like Detroit Lions linebackers know Ben Johnson's offense more than Caleb Williams does right now. That's the opponent you just played. You should almost expect the Detroit Lions to own the Chicago Bears offense this first meeting, especially when it's this early. Look at the Los Angeles Chargers. It's going to take some time. We all look at the Washington Commanders of last year. We all look at the Houston Texans of 2023, and that's what we want. And I understand that. But remember, the Houston Texans played in the NFC South. I'm sorry, Wig, but it's the worst division in the National Football League. It's the weakest division in the National Football League. It was right for the plucking, and it didn't take a whole lot. 2 years or 1 year after they won that division with CJ Stroud, still going to the playoffs, still winning the division, they fired their offensive coordinator because they realized we might be good in the AFC South, but we're not good, okay? Massive grain of salt applied there. The Washington Commanders, fewest miles traveled last year. Not a cupcake schedule, but certainly not the most difficult schedule in the world, and a whole lot of unknowns that people had to adjust to on the fly, right? Cliff Kingsbury's offense, similar, but not the exact same under Jaden Daniels, and you have a very dynamic quarterback. Caleb Williams is coming in here incredibly under pressure. There's a lot of things that Ben Johnson has to undo from what Caleb Williams learned and went through last year. Dennis Allen, I can't tell you. I don't know, guys. You just got to hope I'm wrong on that. But there's just so much, man, working against the Chicago Bears, especially in this Detroit Lions game. If you're truly practicing patience as a Bears fan, take a step back and realize who they just played. Again, you literally just played an opponent that knows your system better than your team. You're always going to lose that game. You're always going to lose that game. It's okay. Like, this is where I'm on the other side of the fence now. Calm down. You know what I mean? You got the Cowboys next. You got the Raiders. Like, you have a lot of opponents this year. Honestly, needs to be about see the scheme take hold, see Caleb Williams grow, which he has in these first 2 games, by the way. If you strip the score, strip the 0-2, strip the division losses, just watch Caleb. He's gotten better these first 2 games. That's your sign for the future. Yeah, you're dead right about that. Caleb's bad plays are real bad, and I think that's always bad optically. But at least he's healthy, because there's a lot of quarterbacks around the league that are banged up, and we're going to talk about that and the ramifications in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is also sponsored by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with can't-miss offers. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I'm telling you, man, you can catch it before the game. Even if you're late, once the game starts, it's not too late. The odds change, but guess what? You can still get in on the action all the way until right before the game finishes.
So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. QB injuries. None more important than the other to the fans. Like Washington fans don't care about what's going on in Cincinnati. But as a whole, the Cincinnati Bengals have an injury that really, really sucks for not only the NFL, but for their fans and for Joe Burrow, who can't stay healthy. I'm going to let James Rapine tell you from Locked On Bengals about Joe and his prognosis, and then we'll come back and give our theories on why these guys are getting banged up so much.
Bengals fans' biggest fear, well, it crept out its ugly head, and unfortunately, Joe Burrow could miss the entire 2025 season. Hi again, everyone. I'm James Rapine from the Locked On Bengals podcast, and Joe Burrow will miss a minimum of 3 months as the toe injury he suffered on Sunday against the Jaguars means that he's going to have surgery. And only like 2% of people that suffer turf toe injuries need surgery. Joe is one of those people, and it's really, really unfortunate. Obviously, for Joe, you're talking about a third major surgery in 6 seasons. Half of his seasons could ultimately end with a surgical procedure. You had the knee when he was a rookie. You had the wrist a few years ago. You have the toe now. So hopefully it isn't season ending. But even if it's not, you're talking about a team that's not going to have Joe Burrow for 11 games minimum, maybe more. Awful, awful news that we're going to break down throughout the day here on the Locked On Bengals podcast. Check us out wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube.
Quarterbacks, they're the superstars of the NFL. They also the dudes that when they're elite, they take up a huge part of your salary cap, which precludes you or will limit you in being able to go out and find other players on your team. So it's always this balance. Here's my theory. A lot of people are going to say, well, Joe Burrow got hurt in the pocket. Jaden Daniels got hurt in the pocket. What are you talking about, Wig? They're not getting hurt running, even though McCarthy did get hurt running up in Minnesota. Here's my point. You know why those defensive ends can pin their ears back and go full bore? Because they understand these formations and they know they don't have to stay at home. And everybody's worried about pass rushers and nobody's worried about guys who stop the run because, well, nobody's valuing actually running the football and using 2 tight ends and chipping the way that teams have done in the past. It's almost as if like people forget that it's football. Everything that you do comes with a price. If you're a wide receiver that likes to run across the middle, teams are going to start hitting you very hard. Look at Brian Thomas Jr. and what's going to happen? Well, we're going to make you think about catching that ball. So I think defensive ends are the same thing. I am saying that the culprit of this is all of those RPOs that cause and create a style of play where they're basically turning quarterbacks into running backs or wide receivers who can throw the football. I know some people's going to take that somewhere where it's not supposed to be. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about play calling in and of itself. We've forgotten what a real pocket is. We've also forgotten what it is to keep people and make people stay at home.
So I think there's a little bit of science, arithmetic, element to this conversation. As quarterbacks have gotten more agile, as offenses have gotten more spread out, defensive linebackers have gotten smaller and faster. And we a lot of time we think of it, and that doesn't mean they're all small and they're all fast, don't get me wrong. But we think about, we're talking generalities here. We oftentimes think smaller projectile, less damage, right? That's not the case. When you combine that smaller projectile with much more speed and force behind it, we hear about speed to power, right? It becomes much more impactful than, say, a big fat dude who can't run, fast at all, pushing you down. Some of these injuries are fluky, right? Like James just kind of said there, the percentage of players that need surgery on turf toe, very low. Joe Burrow, Joe Burrow is very quickly entering that realm for me, Wig, where your body just may not agree with your career choice. You know what I mean? Like you had the knee in the first year, like you said, you got the wrist. The wrist was a fluky injury. Like I never even knew a wrist could do what it did until it happened to Joe Burrow. You know what I mean? And you hate it for Joe because he might end up going down as one of those guys. You're like, man, he could have been the greatest if his body just agreed with his career decisions. You know what I mean? And so it's tough. As far as injuries, look, Jaden actually got hurt outside the pocket. So the play the DQ says he got hurt on, he was running away from Micah Parsons to his left, turned around. There was a DB, hit him in the knee. That's where he said he got hurt. You know what I mean? But I think the point still kind of still stands. I think a lot of this too, and this is kind of a philosophical question that I don't know that I'm intelligent enough, in medical terms, but I've seen enough people talk about it, heard enough conversation about it. Like training camp, soft tissue issues especially are kind of an issue this early in the season. And when your body is just not ready to kind of go through everything that goes through, look, the Washington Commanders, talking about quarterbacks that got injured, right? Talk about that offensive line being able to potentially get in front of Jaden and help protect him, things like that. The Washington Commanders offensive line played less than 1 quarter's worth of snaps together in the preseason than they did in that week 1 game. Now your body goes through that week 1 game, and to talk about the fatigue that sets in, you talk about Thursday night, the short turnaround. If you watch that Thursday night game, that Washington Commanders team looked like the oldest team in the league. You know what I mean? And when you have the oldest team in the league trying to protect one of the youngest quarterbacks in the league and one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the league, like that could be a problem. You know what I'm saying? Now, I'm not saying it changes that play specifically, right? But I think there's something to this. I think a lot more research needs to be done into, like, are we actually, by minimizing training camp, by getting rid of like 2-a-days, by limiting contact in camp, by minimizing the preseason, are we actually helping or are we actually hurting our own cause? Because I can't speak for every other team around the country or around the league, right? But we also have, Austin Eckler suffered a torn Achilles on a non-contact play in that Thursday night game. Dietrich Wise was a fluky injury, right? So that doesn't really apply to this conversation. But John Bates, the tight end for the Washington Commanders, has a soft tissue issue. He's probably not going to play this weekend. Noah Brown, who has an injury history, but he has a soft tissue issue. He's probably not going to play this weekend. Jonathan Jones, veteran cornerback, he suffered an injury. He just got put on injured reserve this morning. Like, how many of these injuries can we just chalk up to, okay, it's kind of fluky, sometimes it happens, put those in a separate category? And then how many of these injuries, these soft tissue, especially in the beginning of the year, can we chalk up to these guys are not getting enough work before they come out to the regular season and just boom, 60, 70 snaps right off the bat? I think there's a conversation that needs to be had there. I don't know if it ever really addresses anything or if the NFLPA pushes to do more work to protect their players, because we don't tend to think that way. But yeah, I think there's something to what you're saying, the way that we play the game, but not only that, the way we prepare the game, the way we train the game before these regular season games start. I think it all matters.
Yeah, I think it does. And the reason why I brought it up mainly is, David, because I know the more attention it gets, what you usually get is, I wouldn't necessarily say a rush to a solution, but you'll get a solution that might not be well thought out, but it sounds really good. So maybe there's some things that teams can do on their own that won't solve the total problem, and maybe is not the reason for it, but you got to help yourself before you expect the whole machine to help you. And I think thinking rationally through it is and people bringing up really, really good ideas. Maybe it's why the Philadelphia Eagles put so much attention to how big and physical their offensive line is. And they have a quarterback that's mobile, right? But they also invest in the running game, and they also do it that way. And as soon as I say this, I hope nothing happens to Jalen Hurts for somebody to say, look, there you go, you're wrong. But I do think that it requires us to have some serious thought about it, and maybe moving forward, we can all get it fixed so we can enjoy the game. And these guys don't.
For starters, get rid of Thursday Night Football.
I think that's a good one. There you go, right there, because that's not enough. It's not enough time.
I love football, man, and I love watching football every day of the week. But if you watch this game enough, you pay enough attention, whether you cover it or not, you don't have to be on ground every day to understand this is not good for players. It is not good for players. And if it's not good for the players, it's not good for the product. You know what I mean? Right. So that's got to be step number one. Forget the single digits, forget number 0, forget higher levels of THC allowed in your blood content. Get rid of Thursday Night Football. You want an 18th regular season game, get rid of Thursday Night Football. Make Monday and Sunday night double headers. That's how you make up the money. Monday night doubleheader, Sunday night doubleheader. Get rid of Thursday Night Football.
I'm all for it, man. And if you want to hear more about it, make sure you tap into Locked On NFL twice a day. The madman Tyler Rowland will wake you up like a double shot of espresso. You can slide through here and get opinions like you just got right here in the barbershop. For me, David, and the other guys that come by every single day with me to make sure you get the content you deserve. We appreciate you spending 34 minutes of your time with us today, and we do not take that for granted here on Locked On NFL. Make sure you tap in around the network. We'll see you next time here on Locked On NFL.